Hey everybody, this is Jacob. Just going to show you how to install this new Fatboy Blue Trigger. Should only take you about 10 to 15 minutes. It's very easy once you know sort of what you're doing. You're just going to need a couple tools to start off with. Recommended a pin punch and I believe this is a 3/16 Allen key. And a small jeweler's hammer. You can pick these up relatively cheap, all these tools. And then you're going to need a small, I can't remember what size this is, Allen key for the pins on the new trigger. So we'll get started. You'll need to get your AR to this point at least. And hopefully if you're at this point you know how to do that. If not, reach out to one of us and we'll gladly walk you through the steps. So let's begin. First things first, you need to release the hammer, which takes off a lot of the tension that's in here because there's a few springs that make all this work. Once you do that, you see these two pins here. This is all that holds your trigger in. And they should just pop out. Sometimes you might have to give them a little pop. And it'll come through on this side. And the reason I'm flipping it over and covering is there's a disconnect in there that likes to fly out. That's your disconnect when you take out these pins, because it's held in there by a spring. And then take out your hammer. Sometimes you have to wiggle it. Boom. Take out the other pin. Here's your hammer. Now all that you're going to be left with is the trigger itself. In order to get that out, depending on your trigger, some might slide out. Others, you're going to have to take out the safety. This one, we're going to have to take out the safety. In order to do that, you have to take off the handguard. Now this is a Magpul MOE grip, so it has this little cover. So just pull it out on the little tab, and it comes off. Take your 3/16 Allen, and hopefully the previous person who installed it didn't torque it down too much for you. One thing to keep in mind though is there is a little tiny spring, and not under a lot of pressure, at least it shouldn't be, but as with all these springs, you just want to make sure that you just cover the part that you're taking off so it doesn't fly out of there. There's your grip, and there's your spring. It's very tiny, sits right in this little pocket, and there's actually a pocket on your grip right there that it actually slides into. So keep that in mind. I'm going to set that off to the side. And there's also, I gotta flip this over, this little detent that actually the spring presses against to hold the safety in. It's the little thing you hear clicking in there when you do your safety. And your safety should pop out like that. You might have to twist and turn it a little bit to get it to slide out, but it should come out fairly easy. No need to crank on it or anything like that. And then afterwards, the trigger just slides right out. So that's that. So all you're left with is basically a strip frame. And here's where your new trigger is going to go. Speaking of, here it is, the new Fatboy new Blue Trigger. Just want to sort of cock it so the hammer's back. Makes it a little bit easier on the install. because now, just like the name implies, your new trigger just drops right in. Okay? Now, there's two holes on the trigger system and on the AR, so the same two holes. And what you're going to do is you have these new pins that come with the trigger. Now I went ahead and installed the bolts on the one side, and you'll see why in a second. These will actually sort of just slide in, at least they should. Some might slide in one hole better than the other, yeah. Just keep working at it. You shouldn't have to really force it much at all. You just might have to wiggle the trigger just a little bit. And that just pushes in. Okay? And do the same thing for this one. Just get it lined up. Just wiggle it. You can use the hammer to wiggle it back and forth a little bit. Now if you're having problems, and you know you're in there straight, you always use the hammer to sort of slightly tap it in. Like so. You shouldn't have to wail on it. If you're having to wail on it, you're doing something wrong. You can also try a little bit of gun lubricant or something like that to help slide it in. I just don't like using it myself. It's a personal preference thing. You flip it over, you just see your same two pins on this side. You take your little bolts, you screw it in. Now these, you shouldn't have to tighten up very much. Almost forgot the blue Loctite. They come pre-threaded with blue Loctite, but I did a quick run through, so that's why they're not on these particular screws, but yours should have them. Okay, so just thread it in. There we go. And at this point you want to just kind of snug them up. Really shouldn't have to crank on them. Get it nice and snug. And at this point your trigger is basically installed. There are two Allen keys down inside the trigger that will actually sort of snug the trigger up into these bolts. So what you have to do is, this can be a little tricky sometimes. Release the hammer. Take your Allen key. I forget which size this is. It is in the instructions. And sort of wedge it down in there. And you feel it drop in. And you just want to give it a couple turns, both sides, just like the instructions say. You sort of have to move. It's kind of hard to show on camera, but there's two springs like this down in there, and you have to sort of move them off to the side like that, in order to get this Allen key down in there. Okay, just rotate your Allen key. There we go. There we go. You know, test for function before you go too much further. It works. So now the next step is to put your safety back in. First thing, slide your safety selector in. Hold it, flip it over, and you're going to see the hole where that D10 pin goes to. This little guy here. So he just drops in. And then you have to either put a little bit of grease, I know some people put Loctite, or you can just figure out a way to keep this pin, or I'm sorry, this spring in here with this D10 pin and your handguard. So I generally just hold it in there. I tend not to try to use any unnecessary stuff. It's not that hard. Just line it up like that. It slides on. Just like that. Check for function. You hear it click. Now you can install your handguard bolt. So get out your 3/16 again. Sometimes it's easier to hold like this and slide that bolt back up in there, like so. Snug it up, and you're basically done. So now you can put your rifle back together. Show you the rifle's clear. Nothing here, nothing there. That's the bolt. Check for function. Beautiful trigger. Absolutely beautiful. So that's your basic trigger and drop-in trigger install. Any questions, comments, please leave them below. And like and share. And make sure to visit our Facebook page as well. Thanks.